I sat in that courtroom watching my husband smirk at me from across the aisle. His mistress, Amber, had her hand on his shoulder like she owned him. Behind them, his mother Patricia sat with her arms crossed, wearing that satisfied expression I'd grown to hate. Brandon's expensive lawyer shuffled papers with confidence. The judge entered and called our case. Brandon leaned back and said loud enough for me to hear, "You'll never touch my money again." Amber purred. "That's right, sweetheart." Patricia nodded. "She doesn't deserve a cent." Then the judge picked up my letter, opened it, and started reading. His expression changed. He laughed out loud. "Oh, this is good," he said quietly. Their faces drained of color. 6 months before that courtroom, I thought I had the perfect life. My name is Fern, and I'd been married to Brandon for 12 years. I worked as a teacher at Roosevelt Elementary School, making $45,000 a year. It wasn't much, but I loved my job. Brandon owned a successful commercial real estate company in Connecticut. He made close to $400,000 annually, sometimes more in good years. We lived in a beautiful colonial home in Fairfield, worth about $800,000. White shutters, wraparound porch, the whole dream. I handled the household while Brandon handled the finances. That was our arrangement. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. We'd built this life together, or so I thought. It was a Tuesday evening, February 14th, Valentine's Day. The school had a half-day for teacher planning, so I got home around 2 in the afternoon. I'd stopped at the grocery store to pick up ingredients for Brandon's favorite meal. Grilled salmon with roasted vegetables and that garlic butter sauce he loved. I was going to surprise him with a romantic dinner. I walked into our house carrying bags of groceries. The alarm didn't beep, which meant Brandon was home. His Tesla was in the garage. I set the bags on the kitchen counter and noticed his home office door was closed. That was unusual during the day. He normally kept it open when he worked from home. Then I heard voices, a woman's laugh, light, flirtatious. My stomach dropped. I walked slowly toward the office. My heart hammered in my chest. Every step felt like walking through water. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was a client call. Maybe it was nothing. I opened the door. Brandon sat at his desk, facing his computer screen. On the monitor was a woman. She was young, maybe late 20s, wearing black lingerie. She was laughing at something Brandon had just said. He was leaning back in his chair, totally relaxed, grinning like a teenager. "I can't wait to see you this weekend, baby," the woman said. "Miami is going to be amazing." "I've got everything planned," Brandon replied. "The hotel suite has an ocean view. You're going to love it." "I love you," she said. "I love you too, Amber." I stood there frozen. 30 seconds passed. They didn't notice me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My brain refused to process what I was seeing and hearing. Then Brandon glanced toward the door. He saw me, and he smiled. Not a shocked expression, not panic. He smiled. Calmly reached over and closed the laptop. The screen went dark. "Well," he said, standing up, "I guess we need to talk." No apology, no shame, no explanation. Just that casual tone like he'd been caught eating the last cookie. He walked past me into the living room and sat on the couch. Gestured for me to sit down like he was about to discuss weekend plans. I followed, my legs barely holding me up. "Her name is Amber," he said. "I've been seeing her for 2 years. She works as a dental hygienist in Stamford. I want a divorce." 2 years. 2 years while I'd been teaching, coming home, cooking dinner, doing laundry, planning our anniversary trips, believing everything was fine. "Why?" I managed to ask. My voice sounded strange, distant. "Because I'm not happy. I haven't been for a long time. Amber is 28. She's fun. She makes me feel alive. You and we've grown apart. You'll be fine. You have your teaching job." He said it so matter-of-factly, like he was returning a defective appliance. Then he pulled out papers from a folder on the coffee table. Legal documents. "I've already filed," he said. "This is just a courtesy, letting you know." I stared at the papers. My name was on them. He'd planned this. "We have a post-nuptial agreement," he continued. "Remember? You signed it 3 years ago." I did remember. Vaguely. He'd come home one evening with papers, said it was for estate planning. His business was expanding, and his lawyer recommended it to protect our assets if anything happened. I'd signed without reading it. I trusted him. That phrase kept echoing in my head. I trusted him. "According to the agreement," Brandon said, "the business is mine. The house is mine. Everything we acquired during the marriage is mine. You waived your rights to marital assets. It's all in the document you signed." My hands went numb. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you don't get anything in the divorce." "Well, that's not entirely true. I'm being generous. I'll give you $10,000 and your car. That Honda is worth maybe $8,000. You can keep your teacher's pension, obviously, but that's it." "Brandon, I helped you build that business. I worked 2 jobs when you were starting out. I used my inheritance from Grandma Rose to help you with the down payment on your first office space. And I appreciate that, which is why I'm giving you $10,000 instead of nothing. Legally, I don't have to give you anything. So be grateful. Most women get less." He stood up, straightened his tie. "I need you out of the house within 30 days. You can stay with a friend or find an apartment. Whatever you do, just be out by March 15th. I sat there, unable to speak. 12 years of marriage. 12 years of supporting him, loving him, believing in us. And this was how it ended. With legal documents and a 30-day eviction notice. That night, I packed a bag and drove to my friend Jenna's house in Bridgeport. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. I told her everything. She held me while I cried on her couch for 3 hours. "We're going to fight this," she said. "You're not letting him destroy you." But I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. I spent the next week calling every divorce attorney in a 50-mile radius. The first lawyer I called was in Stamford. His secretary said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Brandon already consulted with us. We have a conflict of interest." The second lawyer in Norwalk said the exact same thing. So did the third in New Haven, and the fourth in Milford. By the 10th call, I understood what was happening. Brandon had scheduled consultation appointments with every top divorce attorney in the area. Even if they only met with him for 30 minutes, that created a conflict of interest. They couldn't represent me. It's a common tactic used by wealthy spouses to prevent their partners from getting good legal help. I was desperate. I finally found a lawyer willing to take my case. His name was Gary Fletcher. His office was in a strip mall in Bridgeport, between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. The waiting room had worn carpet and outdated magazines, but Gary seemed nice. He was probably in his 60s. Gray hair, kind eyes. He said he'd been practicing family law for 30 years. "I've seen cases like this before," he told me during our first meeting. "Your husband thinks he's clever, but that post-nuptial agreement might not hold up in court. These agreements aren't always enforceable. We can argue you signed under duress, that you didn't have independent legal counsel, that you didn't understand what you were signing." For the first time in a week, I felt hope. His retainer fee was $5,000. I didn't have that much in my checking account. I'd always let Brandon handle the finances, and my teacher's salary went into a joint account he controlled. I had to borrow the money from Jenna. She insisted it was a loan, not a gift, but I knew she was struggling financially too. Her bakery business was barely breaking even. I met with Gary 3 times over the next 2 weeks. Each time, I brought documents. Bank statements I'd managed to print before Brandon locked me out of our online accounts. Property deeds I'd found in our filing cabinet. Business records from Brandon's company I'd photographed with my phone months ago when I was organizing our home office. Gary reviewed everything, He took notes. He said he was building a strong case. Connecticut is an equitable distribution state, he explained. That means marital assets should be divided fairly, not necessarily equally, but fairly. Your contributions to the marriage matter. The fact that you used your inheritance to help start his business matters. We're going to fight this. I left each meeting feeling a little stronger. Week 3 arrived. I drove past our house one afternoon. I couldn't help it. I missed my home, my garden, my kitchen, everything I'd built there. Brandon's Tesla was in the driveway. So was another car, a red Mazda. I sat in my Honda across the street and watched. The front door opened. Amber walked out wearing yoga pants and a tank top. My yoga pants, my tank top. She was carrying a coffee mug, my favorite mug with the sunflowers on it. She saw me sitting there and waved, actually waved at me, like we were neighbors being friendly. Then she blew me a kiss and went back inside. I called Gary, sobbing so hard I could barely speak. Take a deep breath, Fern, he said calmly. This is actually good for us. Your husband moved his mistress into the marital home before the divorce is final. Connecticut still considers fault in divorce. Adultery matters. This helps our case. That made me feel slightly better. Brandon was being arrogant. He thought he'd already won, but his arrogance might be the thing that destroyed him. Week 4. I went to Gary's office for our scheduled strategy meeting. I had more documents to give him. Some papers I'd found in the garage that showed Brandon's business dealings. I wanted Gary to review them before we filed our response to the divorce petition. The strip mall parking lot was almost empty. I walked up to Gary's office door. Locked. A paper sign taped to the glass said, "Closed until further notice." My heart stopped. I called his office number. Disconnected. I called his cell phone. Also disconnected. I knocked on the door. No answer. I went next door to the nail salon. The woman at the front desk said Gary had moved out 3 days ago, middle of the night, took everything. I drove straight to the Connecticut Bar Association office in New Britain. Waited an hour to speak to someone. The woman at the desk looked up Gary Fletcher's name in their system. Gary Fletcher was disbarred 8 years ago for defrauding clients, she told me. He's not licensed to practice law. He's a paralegal, but he's been running scams for years. We've had multiple complaints. Police are looking for him. $5,000. Gone. All the documents I'd given him. Gone. My only lawyer. A con artist. I filed a police report, but the detective told me Gary Fletcher was probably in another state by now. These scam artists move around. They prey on desperate people going through divorces. Chances of recovering my money were basically zero. I sat in my car in the police station parking lot and screamed. Just screamed until my throat hurt. 2 days later, a courier knocked on Jenna's door. I was served with legal papers. Brandon was suing me for defamation. He claimed I'd been spreading lies about him to his business associates, damaging his reputation and business. He was seeking $50,000 in damages. I read through the lawsuit in disbelief. I hadn't talked to any of his business associates. I barely knew them. Then I remembered. Jenna had posted something on social media last week. She'd written a Facebook post defending me, mentioning that Brandon had cheated on me and was trying to steal everything in the divorce. She'd tagged some mutual friends we had. Brandon's lawyer was using that post as evidence, claiming it constituted defamation per se because it accused him of immoral conduct affecting his business reputation. There was more. Attached to the lawsuit was a temporary restraining order. Brandon had filed it simultaneously. He claimed I'd been harassing him and Amber, driving by the house, making threatening phone calls. None of it was true, except for that one time I'd driven past and seen Amber. But the judge had granted a temporary order anyway. I couldn't go within 500 feet of the house. I couldn't contact Brandon except through lawyers. I couldn't go near his office. I had no lawyer. no money to hire a new one, and now I was being sued and had a restraining order against me. I still had to go to work every day, stand in front of 23 third graders and teach them multiplication and reading comprehension while my entire life fell apart. The kids noticed something was wrong. Sweet little Emma asked me if I was sad. I told her I was just tired. The principal called me into her office one afternoon. Parents had complained. They said I seemed distracted. My lesson plans weren't as detailed as usual. Was everything okay at home? I told her I was going through a divorce. She gave me a sympathetic look but said I needed to maintain professional standards. If the complaints continued, she'd have to put me on a performance improvement plan. My job was at risk too. That night, lying in Jenna's spare bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and thought about giving up. Just signing whatever papers Brandon wanted, taking the $10,000 and disappearing. Starting over somewhere new where nobody knew me. But then I remembered something Brandon had said years ago. We'd been at a dinner party. He'd had too much wine. Started bragging to another businessman about how smart investors hide their money. Real wealth isn't in what you show people, he'd said. It's in what you hide. Offshore accounts, shell companies, creative accounting. That's how you protect yourself. At the time, I thought he was joking, showing off. But what if he wasn't? What if Brandon had been hiding money all along? If I could prove that, maybe I had a chance. Brandon once told me that real wealth isn't in what you show people, it's in what you hide. That conversation from 5 years ago kept playing in my head. We'd been at a dinner party at someone's house in Greenwich. Expensive wine, expensive people. Brandon had drunk too much Cabernet and started talking about offshore accounts and creative accounting. The other businessman had laughed, thinking Brandon was joking. But what if he wasn't joking? What if Brandon had been moving money for years, preparing for this divorce? I started researching. I couldn't use my laptop because Brandon had bought it and I was paranoid he'd installed tracking software. So I went to the Bridgeport Public Library every day after school, sat at the public computers and searched for information about hidden assets, offshore banking, shell companies. I learned that wealthy people often hide money in the Cayman Islands, Panama, Switzerland. They create LLCs and trusts to hold property so their names don't appear on public records. They keep 2 sets of books for their businesses. One for the tax authorities, showing less income. One real set, showing actual profits. Everything I read described Brandon's behavior. The secrecy around finances. His insistence on handling everything himself. The business trips to Miami and the Caribbean I'd never questioned. Then I remembered something else. Brandon had a storage unit. He'd mentioned it once, maybe 3 years ago, when I asked where he kept old business records. "I've got a unit over on Boston Avenue," he'd said. "That's where all the files go." I still had that key on my keychain. A small silver key with a red plastic tag. Number 247. The storage facility was 7 miles from Jenna's house. Outside the 500-foot restraining order radius, I could go there legally. Saturday morning, March 20th. I told Jenna I was going to Target. Instead, I drove to Premium Storage on Boston Avenue. My hands shook as I turned into the parking lot. The facility had outdoor units and indoor climate-controlled units. Building C, 2nd floor. I climbed the concrete stairs. The hallway smelled like cardboard and dust. Unit 247 was at the end. The key fit. Inside were filing cabinets, cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling, old furniture, and random office equipment. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I had to document everything. The first filing cabinet had tax returns going back 15 years. I photographed each one. The second cabinet had business ledgers. 2 different sets. One set labeled official and another set labeled internal. My heart raced. The internal ledgers showed revenue numbers twice as high as the official ones. Brandon's company had made over $600,000 last year, but he'd only reported $300,000 to the IRS. I found bank statements next. Accounts I'd never heard of. Cayman National Bank. Account balance as of January 31st, 2025, $1,200,000. Another account at Banco de Panama, $800,000. My hands trembled as I photographed every page. There were property deeds, too. Real estate in Delaware held under an LLC called Coastal Holdings Group. I'd never heard of it. The registered agent was listed as A.M. Enterprises. I didn't know what that meant, but I photographed it. I'd been in the storage unit for 90 minutes. My phone was at 20% battery. I needed to leave soon, but there were so many more boxes to go through. Then I heard voices outside. Men talking. Getting closer. I froze. The voices stopped right outside the unit. A key rattled in the lock. Someone was opening the door. I dove behind a filing cabinet, crouched down, tried to make myself invisible. My phone was still in my hand. I turned the screen off so the light wouldn't give me away. The door rolled up. Brandon walked in. With him was another man. I recognized him from photos. Craig, Brandon's business partner. We need to move this stuff before the divorce is finalized, Brandon was saying. Once that judge signs the papers, she'll never be able to prove anything. What about the IRS audit? Craig asked. They're asking questions about the discrepancies. That's why we move everything now. Offshore, untraceable. I've got contacts in Grand Cayman who can set up new accounts under different corporate structures. As long as the paper trail disappears, they can't prove anything. They started loading boxes into a dolly. I held my breath. Please don't look behind this cabinet. Please don't see me. My phone buzzed. A text message from Jenna. Where are you? You've been gone 3 hours. The sound was barely audible, but in the quiet storage unit, it might as well have been a siren. Brandon's head snapped toward my hiding spot. What was that? He walked over, looked down, saw me crouched there. His face went bright red. What the hell are you doing here? I stood up, legs shaking. This isn't your property. The storage unit is in both our names. I have a right to be here. You're violating the restraining order. No, I'm not. This facility isn't within 500 feet of you or the house. He grabbed for my phone. What did you photograph? I pulled away, but he was faster. He snatched my phone out of my hand, scrolled through my photos. His expression went from angry to terrified. You stupid bitch. You have no idea what you've done. Craig looked nervous. Brandon, man, calm down. Brandon threw my phone on the concrete floor. The screen shattered. He stomped on it. Once, twice, 3 times. The phone cracked apart. Get out, he hissed at me. Get out, or I'm calling the cops. You can't. I said get out. He was screaming now, spit flying from his mouth. Craig stepped between us. Brandon, this isn't helping. But Brandon pushed past him, pulled out his own phone, and dialed 911. I need to report a break-in and an assault, he said to the dispatcher. My ex-wife violated a restraining order and attacked me at my storage facility. I stared at him in horror. I didn't attack you. She did, Craig said quietly to me. I saw it. You need to leave now. You're lying. But the police were already on their way. Brandon stood there with his arms crossed, smirking again. That same smirk from the courtroom. The one that said he'd already won. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes. Brandon showed them the restraining order, claimed I'd been stalking him, said I'd assaulted him when he found me in his storage unit. Craig backed up his story. I tried to explain, but they weren't listening. A woman with a restraining order against her, caught in her ex-husband's storage unit. It looked bad. They arrested me. Put handcuffs on my wrists right there in the parking lot. Read me my rights. Drove me to the Bridgeport police station and booked me. Charged with violating a restraining order and assault in the 3rd degree. I spent the night in a holding cell. Concrete bench. Fluorescent lights that never turned off. A toilet in the corner with no privacy. 2 other women in the cell. One was drunk and crying. The other just stared at the wall. Jenna bailed me out the next morning. $2,000 she didn't have. She put it on a credit card. I now faced criminal charges. If convicted, I'd lose my teaching license. I'd go to jail. Everything would be over. And Brandon had destroyed my phone. All those photos I'd taken, the evidence I'd finally found, were gone. The hearing for my criminal charges was scheduled for April 3rd, 10 days away. The divorce hearing was set for May 15th, 6 weeks away. I had no phone, no lawyer, no money, and now a criminal record. Brandon and Amber celebrated their victory on social media. Jenna showed me the posts on her phone. They'd gone on a vacation to Bermuda, holding drinks with umbrellas, smiling at the camera. The caption said, "Life is good when you leave toxic people behind." I wanted to die. But that night, using Jenna's laptop, I logged into my email account. The account I'd set up years ago that Brandon didn't know about. An old Gmail address I barely used. And I remembered something. Before Brandon smashed my phone, before he found me, I'd been uploading photos to cloud storage. My phone had automatic backup enabled. I logged into Google Photos. Every single picture I'd taken in that storage unit was there. Backed up automatically. The bank statements, the dual ledgers, the property deeds. All of it. Brandon didn't know. He'd thought destroying my phone would destroy the evidence. But he was wrong. I downloaded every photo to Jenna's laptop, saved multiple copies, put them on a flash drive, emailed them to 3 different email accounts. Then I looked at the documents more carefully. Really studied them. That's when I found something that made my blood run cold. Something that changed everything. Something that would destroy Brandon's entire life. The documents I'd photographed told a story Brandon never wanted anyone to see. It wasn't just hidden money. It was fraud. Systematic, deliberate fraud. I spent hours going through every image on Jenna's laptop. The business ledgers showed Brandon had been running a scheme for at least 5 years. He'd sell commercial properties to clients, pocket the commissions, but hide the actual losses when properties underperformed. He'd falsify property values to get higher sale prices. Then he'd take the extra money and funnel it through shell companies. His investors thought they were making money, but they were losing it. Brandon was stealing from them and cooking the books to hide it. The total fraud was probably $3 to $4 million. This wasn't just a divorce case anymore. This was federal crime territory. IRS fraud, securities fraud, wire fraud. But I still had to deal with my own criminal charges first. April 3rd arrived. The hearing for my restraining order violation and assault charge. I walked into Bridgeport Superior Court wearing my only good suit. Black pants, white blouse, gray blazer. I looked like a teacher at a parent conference, not a defendant facing criminal charges. The public defender met me in the hallway. A tired-looking woman in her 30s, carrying too many case files. She spent 5 minutes reviewing my situation. "Look, the prosecutor is willing to offer a deal," she said. "Plead guilty to a lesser charge. Violation of a court order, misdemeanor, you'll get probation, maybe community service. No jail time." But I didn't violate the order. The storage unit wasn't within 500 feet. The judge won't care about the technicalities. Your ex-husband and his witness say you attacked him. You don't have proof otherwise. Take the deal. "No," she sighed. "Then you're on your own. I have 40 other cases today. I can't represent someone who won't listen to advice." I walked into that courtroom alone. The prosecutor was young, aggressive, fresh out of law school, and trying to make a name for himself. He called Brandon to testify first. Brandon sat in the witness box looking respectable in a navy suit. He described how I'd been stalking him since the separation, driving by the house, showing up at his office, sending threatening messages. None of it was true. Then he testified about the storage unit incident, said he'd gone there to retrieve some business files and found me rifling through his private documents. When he confronted me, I became violent, tried to attack him. He had to defend himself. The prosecutor asked, "Did you feel threatened by the defendant?" "Absolutely. She's become unstable. I'm genuinely concerned for my safety and my fiancé's safety." Fiancé. He'd called Amber his fiancée in court. Craig testified next, backed up every word of Brandon's story, said he'd witnessed the whole thing. I'd been aggressive, threatening. They'd had no choice but to call the police. Then it was my turn. I stood up to testify. No lawyer, just me. I explained that the storage unit was a marital asset. I had every right to be there. The restraining order specified 500 feet from Brandon's home and office. The storage facility was 7 miles away. I'd measured it. I testified that Brandon and Craig were lying about the assault. I'd never touched Brandon. He'd destroyed my phone and then called the police to cover up what I'd discovered in those documents. The prosecutor cross-examined me. "Miss Fern, did you or did you not sign a postnuptial agreement waiving your rights to marital assets?" "I signed a document. Yes, but I didn't understand what it was." "But you signed it voluntarily?" Yes, but. And were you, or were you not convicted?" "Excuse me, are you, or are you not currently facing charges for violating a restraining order?" "I didn't violate it." "Yes or no, ma'am? Are you facing these charges?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that you've been telling people your husband committed fraud, damaged his business reputation, behavior consistent with an obsessive and vindictive ex-wife?" "That's not. I never." But I couldn't articulate it properly. I sounded emotional, defensive. Brandon and Craig had been calm and credible. I looked like exactly what they'd painted me as. An angry, unstable woman who couldn't accept that her marriage was over. The prosecutor called one more witness, Amber. She walked to the stand wearing a pale pink dress, pearls, perfect makeup. She looked young and innocent and scared. She testified about the terrifying encounters she'd had with me. Claimed I'd sent her threatening text messages. Things like, "You better watch your back, and you'll regret stealing my husband." I'd never sent any such messages. But she showed the messages to the court. They were on her phone, from a number she claimed was mine. My old phone number. The one Brandon had destroyed. The one I no longer had access to. He'd faked those messages somehow. Or Amber had. And I couldn't prove otherwise. Amber cried on the stand. Brandon reached over and squeezed her hand. The judge watched with sympathy. The judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Ramsey, reviewed the evidence. She looked tired. Probably heard a dozen cases like this every week. "I've heard enough," she finally said. "Miss Fern, I find you guilty of violating the restraining order. The assault charge, I'm not convinced there's sufficient evidence, so I'm dismissing that. But the violation of the court order is clear. Your Honor, I measured the distance. The storage facility. Miss Fern, you were found in a location where your estranged husband had a reasonable expectation of privacy during your separation. Your behavior demonstrates a pattern of harassment. I'm sentencing you to 6 months probation, a $500 fine, and mandatory anger management classes. The restraining order is now permanent and extended. You are to stay 1,000 feet away from Mr. Brandon, Miss Amber, or the marital home. One more violation, and you'll face jail time. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor." I walked out of that courtroom with a criminal record. Guilty. Outside on the courthouse steps, Patricia was waiting. Brandon's mother. She'd been in the courtroom but hadn't testified. She approached me as I walked toward Jenna's car. "You gold-digging piece of trash," she spat. I tried to walk past her, but she grabbed my arm. "My son worked for everything he has. You contributed nothing. You're a lazy, entitled little girl who thought she could coast on his success. Let go of me. You'll never get a dime from him. He's too smart for you." She raised her hand and slapped me. Hard. Across the face. My cheek burned. Jenna ran over. Security guards started moving toward us, but Patricia had already stepped back, hands up. "She came at me aggressively," Patricia called out. I was defending myself. The security guards looked at me, then at Patricia. An older, well-dressed woman versus a younger woman with a fresh criminal conviction. They warned Patricia to leave, but they also told me to go home. No charges filed. My face throbbed where she'd hit me, but worse than the physical pain was the humiliation. A crowd had gathered. People took out their phones, recorded the whole thing. That evening, the video showed up on social media. Someone had posted it with the caption, "Crazy ex-wife attacks innocent mother-in-law outside courthouse." The video had been edited. It didn't show Patricia slapping me. It showed me standing close to her, looking angry, then security intervening. The narrative was that I'd been the aggressor. Brandon shared the video. So did Amber. Their friends commented things like, "Get a restraining order against her too, and she needs serious help." The next day, I received a letter from the school district. I'd been suspended with pay pending an investigation. Parents had complained about my criminal record. They'd seen the video. They didn't want someone with violent tendencies teaching their children. Principal Kowalski called me into her office before I cleaned out my desk. "Fern, I'm sorry. The district has to protect itself. Until this divorce is settled and your legal issues are resolved, we can't have you in the classroom. If the investigation clears you, you can return. But for now, it's suspension." How long? Indefinitely. My career was over. My reputation destroyed. Brandon had systematically dismantled my entire life. I went back to Jenna's apartment, sat on the spare bed, stared at the wall. Jenna knocked on the door. "Fern, you can't give up. We're going to fight this." "With what?" "I have no money, no lawyer, no job, a criminal record. Brandon has won. He hasn't won until you quit." But I felt like I'd already lost. Everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened Jenna's laptop and looked at the documents again. The evidence of Brandon's fraud. All this proof of his crimes, and it hadn't helped me at all. Because I had no way to present it. No lawyer to argue my case. No platform to be heard. The divorce hearing was in 6 weeks. May 15th. Brandon's lawyer had sent me a final settlement offer 3 days ago. $10,000, my car, and a non-disclosure agreement. Never speak about Brandon or the marriage publicly. Except that the postnuptial agreement was valid. Drop any claims to marital assets. "This is more than you deserve, Miss Fern," the cover letter had said. "Take it or you'll walk away with nothing but debt." I had until April 30th to respond. I stared at those documents, at the evidence of everything Brandon had done, the hidden money, the fraud, the lies. And I made a decision. I was going to write a letter. To the judge. I'd represent myself at the divorce hearing. I'd document everything I'd found. I'd lay it all out, in clear, simple language. With exhibits, with proof. It was a long shot. Pro se litigants, people who represent themselves, almost never won against expensive lawyers. Especially not against someone like Harrison Wells, Brandon's attorney who charged $600 an hour. But it was my only option. I started writing. 1 week before the divorce hearing, Brandon made sure I knew I'd already lost. A package arrived at Jenna's house on May 8th. No return address. I opened it sitting at the kitchen table. Inside were photographs. Professional quality. Brandon and Amber on a beach. White sand, turquoise water. Amber wearing a massive diamond ring. They were both smiling at the camera. Brandon had his arm around her. They looked blissfully happy. Engagement photos. A card was tucked inside. Embossed script. To the ex-wife. Thanks for the great life you helped him build. We'll think of you from our honeymoon in Greece. Love, Amber. There were more photos. One showed Amber in what I recognized as our old bedroom. My bedroom. She was lying on the bed, wearing a silk robe. My robe. The cream-colored one I'd bought from Nordstrom 3 years ago. She was wearing my jewelry too, the pearl necklace my grandmother had given me. Another photo showed Patricia with Brandon and Amber. They were at some fancy restaurant. Champagne glasses raised. Everyone dressed up, celebrating. The caption written on the back: "The family Brandon deserves." I threw the photos across the room. Jenna picked them up later, said she'd keep them as evidence. Evidence of what, I didn't know. But it felt good to have someone on my side. 4 days before the hearing, Harrison Wells sent notice that he wanted to depose me. Standard pre-trial questioning. I had to go to his office in downtown Hartford and answer questions under oath. May 11th. I took the train into the city, walked into a glass high-rise building on Main Street. Harrison Wells and Associates occupied the 15th and 16th floors. The office was all marble and dark wood, original artwork on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Connecticut River. This was the kind of lawyer Brandon could afford. This was what money bought. Harrison Wells himself was in his 50s. Silver hair, expensive suit, Harvard Law diploma on the wall. He sat across from me in a conference room with a view. A court reporter sat at the end of the table. Brandon sat in a chair by the window, watching. Harrison started with basic questions. My name, address, employment history. Then he moved into the humiliating stuff. How much do you make as a teacher, Miss Fern? $45,000 a year. But I'm currently suspended. Suspended for what reason? There's an investigation because of the criminal charge. You were convicted of violating a restraining order, correct? Yes. Have you ever been treated for mental health issues? Objection, I said. That's private medical information. Harrison smiled. This is a deposition, not a trial. You don't get to object. Answer the question. I saw a therapist years ago for anxiety. It has nothing to do with this divorce. Have you ever been prescribed psychiatric medication? For anxiety? Yes. Low dose. Years ago. He wrote notes. Would you describe yourself as an emotionally stable person? Yes. Even though you've been convicted of harassment and assault? I wasn't convicted of assault. That charge was dismissed, and I didn't harass anyone. But a judge found you guilty. The judge was wrong. Are you saying our judicial system makes mistakes? I took a breath. Stay calm. Don't let him rattle you. I'm saying I didn't violate the restraining order intentionally. The storage unit was outside the restricted area. But you were found going through Mr. Brandon's private business documents without permission. They're marital assets. I had every right. Did you photograph those documents? I hesitated. If I said yes, I'd have to produce them. If I said no, I'd be lying under oath. My phone was destroyed before I could save anything. Convenient. 3 hours of this. Question after question designed to make me look unstable, vindictive, and broke. Harrison asked about my grandmother's inheritance, how much it was, $15,000, whether I expected to be repaid for that contribution, asked about my teaching salary, and whether I thought I deserved more money because I'd married up. Brandon sat there the entire time, smirking, occasionally whispering something to Harrison. Finally, Harrison slid a document across the table. This is our final settlement offer, $10,000, your vehicle, and you sign a non-disclosure agreement. I've seen this already. Take it, because if you go to trial, you'll get nothing. The post-nuptial agreement is ironclad. Judge will uphold it. You'll walk away with $0 and a pile of legal debt from dragging this out. The post-nuptial agreement was fraudulent. The notary seal is perfectly valid. We've verified it. You're grasping at straws, Miss Fern. Take the money. Move on with your life. I need to use the restroom. Harrison gestured toward the door. Down the hall, second door on the left. I walked out of the conference room. The hallway was quiet. Thick carpet absorbed sound. I passed offices with closed doors. Name plates in brass. Associates, senior partners. I found the restroom, used it, washed my hands, stared at myself in the mirror. I looked exhausted. Dark circles under my eyes, hair that needed a trim, suit that was slightly too big because I'd lost weight from stress. On my way back, I passed an empty desk, a paralegal's workstation, computer monitor showing a screensaver, but next to the keyboard was a file folder. Open. My name on the tab. Brandon V. Fern. I glanced around. The hallway was empty. Everyone was in meetings or offices. I looked at the file, saw the postnuptial agreement on top, but there was something else clipped to it. Handwritten notes in the margin. Notary seal questionable. Commission dates don't match registration. If challenged properly, agreement may not hold up in court. Recommend settling before trial. My heart stopped. Harrison Wells knew the agreement was potentially fraudulent, but he was counting on me not having the resources to challenge it, not having a lawyer who'd catch the discrepancy. I pulled out Jenna's phone from my purse. She'd let me borrow it for the day. Quickly took a photo of the page with the notes. Footsteps in the hallway. Someone coming. I shoved the phone back in my purse and hurried back to the conference room. You were gone a while, Harrison said. Sorry. I wasn't feeling well. Are we done here? Brandon asked. Unless Miss Fern wants to accept our offer now and save everyone time. I need to think about it, I said. You have until April 30th. After that, the offer expires. At trial, we're asking for costs and fees. You'll end up owing us money. I left that office feeling like I'd been beaten up. But I had something. That photo. Proof that they knew the postnuptial agreement was invalid. That night, my phone rang. Jenna's phone. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Is this Fern? A woman's voice. Yes. Who is this? My name is Stephanie. I used to work for Brandon. I was his secretary about 3 years ago. Okay. I heard about the divorce. I saw some stuff on social media. I need to tell you something about Brandon and his business. My pulse quickened. What do you want to tell me? Not over the phone. Can we meet? Tomorrow? There's a coffee shop on Park Street in Hartford. Bean and Brew. Can you meet me there at 10 in the morning? Why are you coming forward now? Because I know what he's doing to you. He did it to someone else. His last partner's wife. Brandon drove them out of the business and took everything. I have documents, emails, things you need to see. A witness. Someone who could corroborate Brandon's pattern of fraud. Yes, I said. I'll be there. 10 tomorrow morning. Bean and Brew on Park Street. Don't tell anyone. If Brandon finds out, he'll stop me. She hung up. I told Jenna. She was skeptical. What if it's a trap? A trap for what? I have nothing left to lose. Just be careful. The next morning, May 12th, I took the train back to Hartford. Found the coffee shop, small place, local, not a chain. A few customers scattered at tables. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window. Waited. 10 o'clock came and went. 10:15, 10:30. Stephanie didn't show. At 10:45, the door opened. Brandon walked in. He saw me and smiled. Walked over to my table. Waiting for someone? He asked. My blood went cold. Behind him, a police officer entered the coffee shop. Officer, that's her, Brandon said, pointing at me. That's my ex-wife, the one I told you about. The officer approached. Ma'am, are you Fern? Yes, but I haven't done anything. I have a report that you've been calling Mr. Brandon and harassing him, in violation of your restraining order. I haven't called him. I don't even have his number anymore. Brandon pulled out his phone, played a recording. A woman's voice, distorted but vaguely similar to mine, saying, "Brandon, you need to stop this. We need to talk. You're going to regret what you're doing." I'd never made that call. The call came from this number. Brandon showed the officer Jenna's phone number, the phone I'd been using. Someone spoofed the call. Or you recorded someone else and edited it. That's not me. The officer looked skeptical. Ma'am, you're already on probation for violating a restraining order. Mr. Brandon says you've continued to harass him. I'm not arresting you right now, but this is an official warning. If you contact Mr. Brandon again in any way, you'll be arrested and charged. Do you understand? This is insane. Stephanie called me, she said. There is no Stephanie, Brandon said calmly. You're making things up now. You're obsessed with me and you can't let go. Officer, I'm genuinely concerned for my safety. The officer turned to me. Ma'am, go home. Stay away from Mr. Brandon. That's your only warning. Brandon left. The officer left. I sat there shaking. It had been a setup. The Stephanie call came from a burner phone Brandon controlled. He'd lured me here to create another harassment incident, to make me look even more unstable before the divorce trial. 2 days before the hearing, I had hit absolute rock bottom. No job, no money, criminal record, evidence against Brandon that I couldn't use because I had no credibility. Every move I made, he was 3 steps ahead. I went back to Jenna's apartment, sat on the spare bed, cried until I had nothing left. Jenna came in. You're not giving up now. Not after everything. What's the point? He's destroyed me. The judge will never believe me over Brandon's lawyers. Then, make the judge believe you. Write it all down. Every detail, every document, every lie. Put it in a letter. Be clear, be factual, be honest. Maybe the judge will actually read it. Maybe. I opened the laptop, looked at all the evidence I'd collected. The photos of the offshore accounts, the business ledgers showing fraud, the wire transfers to Patricia and Amber, the proof of the fake postnuptial agreement, and I started writing. I wrote for 2 days straight, barely slept, barely ate. Jenna brought me food and coffee. 12 pages, single-spaced. I documented everything. The fraudulent postnuptial agreement, the hidden offshore accounts with account numbers and balances, the business fraud, the falsified records, the stolen client money, the fraudulent transfers to Patricia and Amber to hide assets, the fake police reports and manufactured criminal case against me, Brandon's timeline of planning this divorce for years while secretly moving money. I attached photos of documents as exhibits, labeled each one clearly, cross-referenced them in the text. I wrote in clear, factual language. No emotion, just facts, just truth. I ended with, Your Honor, I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for justice. Brandon has committed fraud against me, his business partners, and the Internal Revenue Service. He has weaponized the legal system against me to hide his crimes. I ask that you review this evidence and consider that this is not a simple divorce case. This is a case of systematic financial abuse and criminal activity. I trust in your judgment and the integrity of this court to see the truth. 17 drafts. I rewrote it 17 times. Finally, on the morning of May 15th, I printed it, 12 pages, 20 exhibits attached. Put it all in a manila envelope sealed with tape. Wrote on the outside, for the Honorable Judge Martin Thompson, private and confidential. Jenna drove me to the courthouse. I wore my only good suit again. Carried my folder of documents and the sealed envelope. Brandon arrived in his Mercedes. Amber stepped out wearing a designer dress. Patricia followed in a separate car. Harrison Wells carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. They all looked at me with pity, like I was already defeated. And maybe I was. But I'd done everything I could. I'd fought as hard as I knew how. Now it was up to the judge. I just prayed he'd actually read my letter before throwing it away. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Cold, clinical, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Wooden benches worn smooth from decades of people sitting through the worst days of their lives. Judge Martin Thompson entered at 9 sharp. 60s, stern face, gray hair. He'd probably seen 10,000 divorce cases. What made mine any different? The bailiff called the case. Brandon versus Fern, dissolution of marriage. Harrison Wells stood. Smooth, confident. He'd probably won 100 cases just like this. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Brandon, has attempted to settle this matter amicably and fairly. He has offered Miss Fern $10,000, despite a valid postnuptial agreement that legally entitles her to nothing. Mr. Brandon has been more than generous. Unfortunately, Miss Fern has rejected every reasonable offer and has engaged in a pattern of harassment and false accusations against my client. Harrison presented Brandon as a successful businessman, a generous husband who tried to make the marriage work. He painted me as vindictive and unstable. Your Honor, Miss Fern was convicted just last month of violating a restraining order. She has made wild accusations about my client's business practices. She has demonstrated obsessive behavior. We ask the court to uphold the postnuptial agreement, grant the divorce, and award minimal assets to Miss Fern. The judge listened without expression. Mr. Brandon, please take the stand. Brandon walked to the witness box, raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth. Then he lied for 20 minutes straight. He testified about the difficulties of our marriage, how I'd become increasingly erratic and demanding over the years, how I never contributed financially, how the postnuptial agreement had been my idea, actually. She wanted to protect her teacher's pension, Your Honor. She was worried that if my business failed, I might try to take her retirement funds. So we agreed to keep everything separate. It was her suggestion. A complete fabrication, said with perfect sincerity. Harrison asked, "Did Miss Fern ever express gratitude for the lifestyle your income provided?" "No. She seemed to think she was entitled to everything I'd earned, even though she barely worked. Part-time teaching, summers off. While I was building a business, working 70-hour weeks, I wanted to scream. I'd worked full-time. Summers off didn't mean I wasn't working. I'd graded papers at night, planned lessons on weekends, spent my own money on classroom supplies. But I sat there silent. My turn would come. Harrison called Amber next. She walked to the witness stand wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She looked young and innocent and hurt. "Miss Amber, can you describe your relationship with Mr. Brandon?" "Brandon and I met 2 years ago. At first it was just friendship. He was so unhappy in his marriage. He tried to make it work with Fern, but she was cold and distant. Eventually, we fell in love. But we didn't begin a romantic relationship until after he'd made the decision to divorce." Another lie. "I'd caught them on video chat a year ago, clearly already involved. Has Miss Fern harassed you?" Amber's eyes filled with tears. "Yes. She sent me threatening messages. Told me I'd regret being with Brandon. She's driven past our home multiple times. I've been terrified." She pulled out her phone, showed the judge text messages, threats that allegedly came from me, messages I'd never sent. She even showed up at my workplace once, at the dental office where I work, caused a scene in front of patients. I'd never been to her workplace. This was completely fabricated. But the judge wrote notes. He looked at me with something like disgust. Patricia testified next. Character assassination. I'd always been lazy, entitled, waiting for Brandon's success so I could benefit. Never appreciated anything he did for the family. Your Honor, I begged my son not to marry her. I knew she was only interested in his money. I was right. Now that he's successful, she wants everything, even though she contributed nothing. Harrison presented bank statements, pay stubs, financial records. all showing that Brandon had earned vastly more than me, that the postnuptial agreement clearly stated all business assets remained his property, that I had no legal claim to any of it. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. The postnuptial agreement is valid. It was signed voluntarily, notarized properly, and clearly states that each party retains separate property. Miss Fern is simply unhappy with the outcome and is trying to use the court to punish her ex-husband for moving on. 2 hours of this, building a narrative that I was an obsessive, vindictive ex-wife who wanted money I hadn't earned. Finally, the judge looked at me. Miss Fern, are you represented by counsel? I stood. No, Your Honor. I'm representing myself. His expression showed what he thought of that. Pro se litigants rarely won in family court. We didn't know the procedures, couldn't argue effectively, got emotional. You may present your case. I walked to the witness stand, swore to tell the truth, sat down. My hands shook. I'd never done this before, never testified in court. I was a third-grade teacher, not a lawyer. I told the truth about the early years of our marriage, how I'd worked double shifts as a waitress while Brandon was starting his business, how I'd given him my grandmother's inheritance, $15,000, as seed money for his first office space, how I'd supported him emotionally and financially while he built his company, how I'd trusted him completely with our finances, never questioned where money went, believed him when he said everything was for our future. The day I discovered the affair, walking into his office and seeing him on video chat with Amber, his complete lack of remorse, the postnuptial agreement he'd presented, how he'd told me it was estate planning, how I'd signed it without reading it because I trusted my husband. Your Honor, I didn't know I was signing away all my rights. I thought we were protecting each other. Instead, he was protecting himself and planning to leave me with nothing. Harrison stood. Objection. Speculation about my client's intentions. Sustained. Miss Fern, stick to facts, I continued. Testified about Brandon moving Amber into our home before the divorce was final, about the manufactured criminal case against me, about being arrested at the storage unit when I was simply trying to access marital documents. Harrison cross-examined me. He was brutal. Miss Fern, you signed this postnuptial agreement voluntarily, correct? Yes, but I didn't understand. Yes or no? Yes. You're a college-educated woman with a bachelor's degree, correct? Yes. You can read? Of course. So you chose not to read a legal document before signing it? I trusted my husband. That was your choice. Now you regret it and want the court to bail you out of your own poor decision-making? It wasn't a poor decision to trust my husband. You were convicted of violating a restraining order, correct? Yes. But, yes or no? Yes. You've made accusations that Mr. Brandon committed fraud. Where's your proof? I have documents. Documents you allegedly found while illegally entering my client's storage unit? It wasn't illegal. I had a key. Documents that conveniently support your narrative that you deserve money you didn't earn? I did earn it. I supported him for years. By teaching part-time? It wasn't part-time. I worked full-time. But I sounded hysterical, defensive, emotional. Everything Harrison wanted me to sound like. He'd destroyed my credibility in 5 minutes. The judge called for a recess. We'll resume in 15 minutes. I walked out into the hallway, sat on a bench, put my head in my hands. Jenna found me. You did fine. I sounded crazy. You sounded like someone telling the truth. We went back in. The judge asked if there was any additional evidence. This was it. My last chance. Yes, Your Honor. I've prepared a letter for you, with supporting documentation. I stood and approached the bench, handed him the sealed envelope. Harrison jumped up. Your Honor, we haven't been provided this evidence. This violates discovery rules. It's addressed to the court, Counselor. The judge can review whatever he wants. Judge Thompson looked at the envelope. Looked at me, This is highly irregular, Miss Fern. I know, Your Honor, but I'm representing myself. I don't know all the procedures. I'm just asking you to look at what I found, please. He took the envelope. I'll review it, but I'm not promising anything. Harrison looked annoyed, but sat down. Brandon whispered something to him. Harrison whispered back, probably saying not to worry. The judge opened the envelope, pulled out my 12-page letter and the exhibits, started reading. The courtroom was silent. Just the sound of pages turning, the hum of the fluorescent lights. I watched his face, tried to read his expression. At first, nothing. Neutral, professional. Then his eyebrows raised slightly. He flipped to one of the exhibits, the bank statement from the Cayman Islands. Studied it. Turned to another page, the business ledger showing 2 sets of books. His mouth twitched. Was that surprise? Interest? 3 minutes passed. Felt like 3 hours. He reached page 8 of my letter. The section about the fraudulent transfers to Patricia. His eyes widened just a bit. Page 10. The proof that Harrison's office knew the postnuptial agreement was invalid. His jaw tightened. Page 12. My conclusion, asking for justice, not revenge. He set the letter down, looked at the exhibits again, picked up the photo of the notary seal, examined it closely. Then he actually laughed. Not a big laugh, just a short bark of surprised laughter. He immediately tried to cover it with a cough, but everyone heard it. He said quietly, almost to himself, "Oh, this is good." Brandon's face went white. Amber grabbed his hand. Patricia leaned forward, trying to see what the judge was reading. Harrison looked genuinely concerned for the first time all day. They knew something had gone very wrong. Judge Thompson looked up, looked directly at Brandon and Harrison, then at Patricia, then at Amber. "Mr. Wells, I have some questions for your client." Harrison stood. "Of course, Your Honor." "Mr. Brandon, please return to the stand. You're still under oath." Brandon walked back to the witness box. His confidence was gone. He looked nervous. "Mr. Brandon, are you familiar with an account at Cayman National Bank? Account number ending in 4782? Brandon's face went pale. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Your Honor. It shows a balance of $1,200,000 as of January 31st of this year. Is that your account? I'd have to review my records." "Yes or no?" Harrison jumped up. "Your Honor, I object. Where is this information coming from? We haven't been provided with." "Mr. Wells, your client is under oath. He'll answer the question." Judge Thompson's voice had gone cold. "Mr. Brandon, is that your account?" Brandon looked at Harrison. Harrison looked panicked. Yes, Your Honor. It's a business account." "A business account not reported in your financial disclosures for this divorce?" Silence. "I also have questions about a property transfer, a wire transfer of $200,000 from your business account to Patricia Brandon 2 months ago. Miss Patricia, that's you, correct?" Patricia stood up. "Your Honor, that was a loan. A private family matter." "Sit down, ma'am, or I'll hold you in contempt." "Patricia, Saturday." Her face was bright red. Judge Thompson continued. "This $200,000 loan was immediately used to purchase property in Florida under an LLC called Coastal Holdings Group. The registered agent for that LLC is listed as A.M. Enterprises. Miss Amber, are you A.M. Enterprises?" Amber's eyes went wide as plates. What? I don't know what that means." "You're listed as the registered agent for several business entities owned by Mr. Brandon. Were you aware that as a registered agent, you could be personally liable for fraudulent asset transfers?" "Brandon, what is he talking about?" Amber's voice was shrill. "Amber, don't say anything," Brandon hissed. Judge Thompson's expression hardened. "Mr. Brandon, do not instruct witnesses in my courtroom." He turned to Harrison. "Mr. Wells, I'm looking at these business ledgers. One set shows reported income of $250,000. Another set, labeled internal, shows actual income of $600,000. Can you explain this discrepancy? Harrison was shuffling through papers frantically. Your Honor, I'd need time to consult with my client and review these documents. I'm sure you would. I'm also looking at the postnuptial agreement. The notary seal shows a commission date of March 15th, 2022. However, according to Connecticut notary records, this particular notary's commission expired March 1st, 2022, 2 weeks before this document was allegedly notarized. Can you explain that? Harrison went silent. Completely silent. Mr. Wells, I have a note here, allegedly from your office file, suggesting your firm was aware of this issue with the notary seal. Is that accurate? Harrison looked like he might be sick. Your Honor, I would need to investigate who wrote that note and... So you're not denying such a note exists? I'm not confirming anything without reviewing my files. I see. Judge Thompson leaned back. I'm going to take a 30-minute recess. When I return, I expect full cooperation from all parties. Because based on what I'm reading here, we may need to involve some additional authorities. Brandon found his voice. What authorities? The Internal Revenue Service, for one. Possibly the Connecticut State Attorney's Office for fraud investigation. This appears to be more than a simple divorce case, Mr. Brandon. This appears to be systematic financial fraud. Patricia gasped. Actually gasped like someone in a soap opera. Amber turned to Brandon, her voice rising. You told me everything was legal. You said she had nothing. You said we'd be fine. Shut up, Amber, Brandon snapped. Mr. Brandon! The judge's voice cracked like a whip. Do not speak to anyone that way in my courtroom. In fact, don't speak at all unless I ask you a direct question. Judge Thompson stood. Everyone stood. He gathered my letter and the exhibits. Miss Fern, you'll need to remain available. You may have additional testimony to provide. Mr. Wells, I suggest you consult with your client very carefully during this recess. We resume in 30 minutes. He left through the door behind the bench. The moment he was gone, Brandon exploded. You bitch! He pointed at me across the courtroom. You've ruined everything. You have no idea what you've done. Harrison grabbed his arm. Brandon, stop talking. Right now. But Brandon was beyond reason. She's destroyed my life. My business. Everything. Security guards started moving toward us. Patricia was crying. Amber backed away from Brandon like he was radioactive. You said this would be simple. Amber was yelling now. You said she had nothing. You said the agreement was valid. Now I'm involved in fraud? It's not fraud. It's just asset protection. That's the same thing, you idiot. People from other courtrooms were looking in, watching the spectacle. Jenna grabbed my arm. Come on. Let's wait in the hallway. We stepped out. I was shaking. Couldn't believe what had just happened. The judge had actually read my letter. Actually looked at the evidence. Actually asked the right questions. Inside the courtroom, Brandon and Harrison were arguing. Patricia was sobbing. Amber was on her phone, probably calling her own lawyer. The 30-minute recess stretched to 45 minutes, then an hour. Finally, the bailiff called us back in. Judge Thompson sat at the bench. His expression was grim. I've made some phone calls during the recess. I've spoken with the state attorney's office and the IRS regional office. Both agencies are interested in reviewing the evidence Miss Fern has provided. Brandon looked like he might pass out. As for this divorce case, I'm making the following immediate rulings. First, the postnuptial agreement is declared null and void. The notary seal is fraudulent, and there are serious questions about whether Miss Fern had proper representation when signing. Second, I'm ordering an immediate freeze on all of Miss Brandon's assets pending a full forensic audit. That includes business accounts, personal accounts, offshore accounts, and any real estate held under corporate entities. Third, I'm granting Miss Fern temporary exclusive use of the marital home. Mr. Brandon, you have 72 hours to remove your personal belongings and vacate the property. Your Honor, that's my house, Brandon shouted. Mr. Brandon, one more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. It's the marital home, and I'm awarding temporary possession to Miss Fern. He turned to Patricia and Amber. Miss Patricia, the property you purchased in Florida will be frozen pending investigation into the source of funds. Miss Amber, you'll need to cooperate with investigators regarding your role in these corporate entities. I'm not making any determinations about criminal liability today, but I strongly suggest you both retain separate legal counsel. Patricia made a choking sound. Amber was crying. Finally, I'm referring this case to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division and the Connecticut State Attorney for prosecution. Mr. Brandon, you'll be receiving subpoenas for documents and testimony. Mr. Wells, if your firm knowingly presented fraudulent documents to this court, you may face disciplinary action from the Bar Association. I'm ordering you to preserve all case files. Harrison looked like his career was flashing before his eyes. This case is continued for 90 days while investigations proceed. We'll reconvene to finalize the divorce after those investigations conclude. Miss Fern, excellent work on your letter. Court is adjourned. He stood. Everyone stood. He left. Brandon turned to me one more time. His face was purple with rage. I'll destroy you for this. You already tried, I said quietly. It didn't work. Security escorted him out. He was screaming threats all the way down the hallway. Jenna hugged me. You did it. You actually did it. I couldn't process it yet. Couldn't believe it was real. But it was real. The judge had believed me. Had seen through Brandon's lies. Had done what I'd prayed someone would do. He'd listened to the truth. Judge Thompson ordered a full forensic audit of Brandon's business and assets. Over the next 3 months, Brandon's entire empire unraveled like a sweater with one loose thread. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division took over first. They found tax evasion totaling $1,800,000 over 5 years. Brandon had been reporting about half his actual income, hiding the rest in offshore accounts and shell companies. The Connecticut State Attorney followed. They discovered investor fraud totaling $3,200,000. Brandon had been running what essentially amounted to a Ponzi scheme. He'd take money from new real estate investors, use it to pay returns to earlier investors, and pocket the difference. He'd falsify property values and sale prices to make deals look profitable when they were actually losing money. His business partners filed lawsuits within weeks. Craig, the partner who'd lied for Brandon at the storage unit, turned state's witness to save himself. He testified that Brandon had masterminded everything and threatened him into compliance. Several clients filed criminal complaints. Retirees who'd invested their life savings based on Brandon's promises. Small business owners who'd trusted him with their commercial real estate deals. All of them defrauded. Patricia was charged as an accessory for knowingly accepting fraudulent transfers. That $200,000 she'd used to buy the Florida property? The prosecutor proved she'd known it was hidden divorce assets. She ended up pleading guilty to 1 count of conspiracy, got 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and had to forfeit the Florida property. She also became completely estranged from Brandon, blamed him for destroying the family reputation. They haven't spoken since. Amber avoided criminal charges by cooperating with investigators. Turned out she really hadn't known the full extent of Brandon's fraud. She'd just been a 28-year-old dental hygienist who fell for a charming older man with money. The prosecutor decided she was more victim than accomplice. But her life was still destroyed. She lost her job when the dental office didn't want the scandal. Her name was in all the newspapers connected to the case. She moved back to her parents' home in Michigan and disappeared from social media entirely. Brandon's criminal trial happened 8 months after our divorce hearing. I testified as a witness. So did the forensic accountants. So did his former clients and business partners. The jury convicted him on 14 counts: tax evasion, wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy to defraud. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Judge at the sentencing hearing said, "Mr. Brandon, you systemically defrauded dozens of people, including your own wife. You showed no remorse. You tried to use the legal system as a weapon against the one person who discovered your crimes." The sentence reflects not just the financial damage you caused, but the cruel manipulation you inflicted on everyone around you. Brandon also had to pay $2,100,000 in restitution to his victims. Between that and the legal fees, he declared bankruptcy. His business dissolved, his professional licenses revoked, his reputation completely destroyed. As for the divorce, that finalized 6 months after the initial hearing. The forensic audit revealed that Brandon's actual net worth, including all hidden assets, was approximately $2,800,000. Under Connecticut's equitable distribution law, I received just under half. The final settlement gave me the marital home, which was worth $800,000. I also received $400,000 in cash from liquidated business assets. My grandmother's $15,000 seed money was returned with interest, totaling $22,000. I got half of Brandon's pension when he eventually becomes eligible. And I received $50,000 in compensatory damages for emotional distress. Total value: approximately $1,300,000. Not as much as Brandon had hidden, but enough. More than enough. More than he'd ever wanted me to have. The criminal conviction for my restraining order violation was expunged after my lawyer, a real one this time, filed an appeal showing the conviction was based on Brandon's manufactured evidence. The school district reinstated me with back pay. I returned to teaching at Roosevelt Elementary. Principal Kowalski apologized personally, said the district should have supported me better. I told her I understood. Everyone was just trying to protect the children. My students made me welcome back cards. Little Emma, now in 4th grade, gave me a drawing of a superhero with my face. The caption said, "Mrs. Fern is brave." I cried in my empty classroom after school that day. I sold the marital home. Too many bad memories. Bought a smaller house in a different neighborhood. A cozy ranch-style place with a garden and a front porch. Not as fancy as the Colonial, but it's mine. Truly mine. Bought with my settlement money. No one can take it from me. I invested most of the settlement conservatively. Mutual funds, retirement accounts. Enough to be comfortable, pay off my student loans, build a real emergency fund. I still teach because I love it, not because I have to. I started a support group for women facing financial abuse and divorce. We meet twice a month at the library, share stories, share resources, help each other navigate the legal system. Some of these women are facing situations worse than mine. Some are facing situations not quite as bad. But all of them need to know they're not alone. I also started a blog. Nothing fancy, just a simple website where I tell my story. I leave out identifying details to protect privacy, but I'm honest about what happened. About the betrayal, the legal battles, the manipulation, about how I almost gave up. The blog gets a few thousand readers a month. I've received hundreds of emails from women saying my story gave them courage to fight back, to not accept the scraps their husbands offered, to demand justice. That means more to me than the money ever could. Jenna and I are still best friends. I paid back every penny she lent me, with interest. She tried to refuse, but I insisted. She used the money to expand her bakery business. It's thriving now. We have coffee every Sunday morning and laugh about that terrible year when my life fell apart. You know what the craziest part is? She said last week. Brandon actually thought he was smarter than everyone. Thought he could fool the courts, the IRS, everyone. Pride comes before the fall, I said. Or in his case, pride comes before 5 years in federal prison. We both laughed. Dark humor, maybe, but sometimes that's what gets you through. I don't hate Brandon anymore. That's the honest truth. Hate takes energy, and I don't want to give him any more of my energy. He's in prison. His life is destroyed. His son from a previous marriage won't speak to him. His mother blames him for her legal troubles. Amber wants nothing to do with him. He lost everything that mattered. That's consequence, not revenge, and consequence is enough. What I learned through all of this is that truth is more powerful than money, more powerful than expensive lawyers, or manufactured evidence, or attempts at intimidation. Brandon spent years building a house of cards. Thought his wealth made him untouchable. Thought he could manipulate the system forever. But he underestimated me. Thought I was just a teacher. Just someone who trusted him. Someone who'd roll over and accept whatever scraps he threw at me. That was his biggest mistake. He forgot that truth doesn't care how expensive your lawyer is. It doesn't care about your offshore accounts or your clever schemes. Truth is patient. It waits. And when it finally comes out, it destroys everything built on lies. People sometimes ask me if I'm grateful for what happened. That's a complicated question. I'm not grateful for the betrayal or the pain or the year of hell Brandon put me through. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But I'm grateful for who I became because of it. I learned I'm stronger than I thought, braver than I believed, more resilient than I ever imagined. I learned that I can stand up when everyone expects me to fall down, that I can speak truth when liars seem to be winning. I learned that justice, real justice, isn't about revenge. It's about standing in integrity, even when it's hard, even when it costs everything, even when the outcome is uncertain. Sometimes, I drive past the courthouse where it all happened, that cold courtroom where Judge Thompson read my letter, where I watched Brandon's face change from smug confidence to pale terror, where everything shifted in a single moment, and I smile. Not because I destroyed him, but because I saved myself. That letter I wrote, those 12 pages documenting years of fraud and manipulation, changed my life. But more importantly, it changed me. It taught me that my voice matters. That truth spoken clearly and bravely has power. That one person standing up can make a difference. I keep a copy of that letter in my desk drawer. Sometimes when I'm having a hard day, when a student is struggling or I'm feeling overwhelmed, I take it out and read it. Remember who I was when I wrote it. Remember how scared I was. Remember how I did it anyway. That's courage. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. To anyone reading this who's facing something similar, who's dealing with betrayal or financial abuse or a system that seems stacked against them, I want you to know you're stronger than you think. Document everything. Tell the truth, find your voice, and use it, even if it shakes. The system isn't perfect. Judges don't always read letters from pro se litigants. Justice doesn't always prevail. But sometimes it does. Sometimes truth wins. Sometimes the person who thinks they're untouchable learns they're not. And sometimes, a middle school teacher with a broken phone and a borrowed laptop can take down a man who thought he owned the world. That's not revenge. That's just what happens when someone finally stands up and says enough. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against impossible odds? Have you fought back when everyone expected you to give up? What gave you the strength to keep going? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more true stories about resilience, justice, and standing up for yourself. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that they're not alone in their fight. Together, we can support each other through the hardest battles. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for letting me be vulnerable with you. Thank you for being part of a community that believes in justice and truth. I wish you strength in your own battles, whatever they may be. I wish you the courage to speak your truth. I wish you peace on the other side of whatever storm you're weathering. And I wish you the kind of ending where you look back and realize you didn't just survive, you triumphed. Not over someone else, but over the part of yourself that wanted to give up. That's the greatest victory of all.